loads of torque. Welcome back, I'm Tedward, and today we're getting a first look at the 2022 Audi e-tron GT, thanks to Audi Shrewsbury, part of the McGovern Auto Group here in Massachusetts. They invited me out to drive the new Audi EV sports car, and if you're thinking, well, this looks fairly familiar, you'd be correct, because it does share a lot of its architecture with the Porsche Taycan. About 40% is shared with the Taycan, although this muscular, curvaceous body, I think it's a little more appealing than the Porsche. I am not as big a fan of this chunky taillight as I think a lot of other people are, but that's okay. My opinion is just my opinion. But on the road, this certainly has a monster, massive, and muscular presence, especially when you get way down low and see this diffuser and these big, wide rear tires. So how is it powered? Well, very similar to the Taycan. It has two motors, one on the front, one on the rear, and the rear motor is connected to a 2-speed transmission. This being the Prestige base model, not the RS, has 469 horsepower, although it can be overboosted to just above 520. This e-tron GT is equipped with the driver's package, but more importantly, it's equipped with the performance package, which gives you a couple great options. One, 4-wheel steering. We love that. Great tight turning radius and improves the performance, makes it feel like a shorter wheelbase in the corners and a longer wheelbase on the highway. And it also has the torque vectoring rear differential, so it can send that power to the outside wheel when you're carving a corner and just scoot it along just a bit more. But here's the thing. This is a very practical car. Despite its shape, it does not have a hatchback. It has a normal trunk, and back here, there's quite a bit of room, which can be extended because those rear seats fold down. We've got some deep cavernous pockets in the back, which oddly enough, for me, that's what I want to store my oil, but in this car, you will not need to do that. And then, of course, for a little extra privacy, down here, some other stuff that you don't want rolling around, you can pop in there. So that is lovely and practical. Let's close that up and take a look in the rear seats. Back here in my driving position, I certainly have plenty of room. It's not the most comfortable place in the world, but I do have plenty of headroom despite the curvaceous roofline of the vehicle. And it does, although it doesn't look like it, have a middle seat. This does have, it's so bizarre though, you'd be sitting almost right on that seatbelt, but that's fine. If you really needed to get a fifth person in here, you could do it. And then, not surprisingly, an armrest, cup holders, and down here, you have a couple USB charging ports. I wouldn't call it cramped, but I would call it cozy. And here's those rear folding seats. That's fantastic. You can probably fit a lot of stuff in this car. There is also some storage in the front, and it took me a little while to figure out where it was. But while I was hunting around, I noticed that the brake pedal has a carbon fiber, or what appears to be a carbon fiber lever arm. That's interesting. But no, your front button is not over there. It's actually on this door. And under here, not a ton of space up here, but just enough if you had something kind of smelly and you didn't want it in the cabin or in the trunk, you throw it up here for a few minutes before you get to the dumpster. Washer fluid can be added here, as well as brake fluid up top. Should also be mentioned that even on these monster 20-inch wheels, the tires have plenty of sidewall. You've got a 245/45 up front and a 285/40 in the rear. That makes me feel optimistic for the ride quality. One nice thing about it is that it's an Audi, so the interior feels like an Audi. It doesn't feel like some wild, crazy thing, and that means we also get a pretty normal start-stop button. It's very quiet as the air conditioning system comes on, and that's nice because it's over 80 degrees today. We can quickly and easily turn that display off with one button. I love that, and then pop it into drive using this interesting and unique little shifter. Just like that, you are off to the races. This thing really boogies. But it's not quite as fast as the Tesla, I gotta say. Let's test out these brakes. Yeah, that's German engineering. While it does feel very ordinary in terms of being a wonderful German car, there's nothing that outrageous about it in terms of its dynamic handling, although it does weigh nearly 5,000 pounds. Let's see what she does in a corner. Little understeer, we get on throttle, off we go past a Prius, that polluting hybrid. So there's going to be a bit of tire squeal. Part of that is because we're not on some crazy performance tire. I'm sure these are a little bit geared for economy because this does have a range of 200 and let's say 35, 240 miles. That may sound low relative to its Tesla counterparts, and you could make that argument. And if range is your whole deal, then this and the Taycan may just be out. But if you're looking for a familiar luxury vehicle with a brand that you're comfortable with, that you're familiar with, also a brand that you can get serviced easily, I mean, that's to me is kind of the reason not to buy a Tesla, is that I've heard some horror stories about having things fixed, even body work. It's very difficult to find a shop that's Tesla certified. So here we are doing my favorite thing in an electric car, which is sitting in traffic. I'm just sitting at a light. I don't have to listen to an engine idling. I don't have the stress of an internal combustion engine churning away, trying to keep the thing running, trying to keep my AC going. And that's where the beauty of this really works out as a commuter. So if you are able to get that charge every night or every day or every other day, then, I mean, man, this is a great way to live. It's very relaxing to have an electric car, no matter what electric car you're driving. I'm not just trying to sell that Audi point. Incredibly tight turning radius. Off we go. So I don't know if I'm overboosting. I don't think I am. I feel like it's got a little more juice left. I feel like I might just be feeling that 469 horsepower, not the 500 plus, which is fine, but it is noticeable that, there is something that's not there. There is a little bit missing. Easy rider, man. You got the helmet. All right, so let's jump out over here. Make a pass. Insulation is wonderful, and that's a godsend in an EV because without an internal combustion engine, you're missing a portion of the car that your ears tune out. Your brain tunes out this white noise of an engine, which means that all the other noises in the car start to become more prominent. It's like if you lost your vision, maybe you have a keener sense of hearing. And in this car, because it's well insulated, because it certainly feels like an Audi, it feels like a beefy Grand Touring product. It's a joy. Now, the one piece of road noise that I could do without is the tire noise. Steering is fairly light. I don't know if it's fair to count that against it, but it is something to be noted that it's not like this big weighted thing. This does have the equipped Power Steering Plus, so I think at lower speeds it does amplify the softness and allow you to move that wheel very quickly. Got to take the pothole line on this on-ramp. Yeah, despite the weight, it handles quite well. I'm pretty impressed with what they've done with the heft. It's really a nice thing to chuck into a corner. Although I think I want a little more torque. Maybe the RS is the answer to this thing. Maybe you do need the RS to get all of that juicy performance out of the thing, which is going to cost you $140,000 versus the roughly $105 to $110 in this. Okay, let's just talk ergonomics for a second, because one of the things that always drives me nuts in a Tesla is the screen. Everything is a touch screen, and it's becoming more and more touch screen. In fact, the new Plaid, even the gear selector is on the screen. I do not like that. That is not something I want to deal with. And in this Audi, we don't even have the dual screen setup that you've seen in most new Audis, where all the climate controls are on that lower level screen. In fact, this one has buttons. It has actual buttons, and I love that because I like buttons. I don't want to deal with going through 3 menus to change my volume or to change my HVAC system. I just want to touch the thing because I don't want to have to actually take my eyes off the road to look for it. Let's jump off here and enjoy some normal driving. What you're noticing as well is that I have to use the brake. I do, and a keen eye might notice that I have paddles on the wheel. So what on earth is a paddle shifter going to do? I've got a 2-speed transmission in the rear, but am I really shifting gears? No, this is for regen and the amount of regen you want. So what you can see over here on this little screen is where it goes to 0. But if I pull this back, you can see another piece of the display start to move down below zero, essentially, saying how much regen you would like this car to make. Now, it doesn't really have one pedal driving in the traditional sense. So when I get off the pedal, even though I have that regen all the way down as far as I can make it go, it's not slowing the vehicle down significantly. It's slowing it down as if it's engine braking on a traditional internal combustion engine car with a manual transmission or a DCT. So, what's it doing? Well, when I apply a little bit of brake, it's actually not going to be applying the calipers. It's going to be applying that regen. So, this takes a more traditional approach to slowing the vehicle down, where getting off the throttle doesn't thrust you forward, turn on the brake lights, and bleed off all that speed. Love it or hate it, man. That's something that I actually don't like one pedal driving that much. It's something that I haven't really been able to get used to that much in a Tesla. Maybe if I spent a lot of time doing it, sure. But I do appreciate Audi sticking to its guns on this one, because Taycan is the same way. Visibility is quite good in the e-tron GT, although there is a surprise. That rear glass. It looks really big from the outside, but because of the angle, almost the same way a Huracan windshield looks, that's a very small vertical space, which means that you don't have a ton of vision out of the back. It's not that obstructed though, so it really is easy to use. It's just that when I got in here, it kind of looked like I was squinting at it, and the more I'm driving it, the more I'm used to it, the more it's really not fazing me. And I've got nice big chunky mirrors on the side as well, which is giving me lots of information. I see a tunnel, it must be done. Not much gonna happen, no exhaust. I'd also like to point out this lovely Alcantara steering wheel, which is something that the Volkswagen Audi group does very well. Obviously, they've got Porsche and Lamborghini in their ranks, so they're able to kind of provide those nice touch surfaces that make something feel especially premium. Although piano black, I'm gonna put my fingerprints all over this car. Not my favorite, we could do without that. But the rest of this trim is carbon fiber, and I do like that. I also don't find the electric car noises to be offensive. This does have kind of an electric car noise to indicate what you're doing, which I think is important, because as a driver, you do use auditory feedback to figure out what's happening. And to have a complete lack of that feels very weird. And of course, on the outside of the vehicle, there's a little bit of a tone, so that way in parking lots, a pedestrian might hear you and notice that a vehicle of a 5,000-pound car is coming at them. We don't want literal silent killers. In terms of comfort, this is kind of a yucky road. Let's put it into comfort mode. Apparently this is some kind of newfangled 3-chamber suspension setup. I feel like we've just raised up a little bit. That's great. It'll give me some ground clearance, which I want over some of these bumps. But yeah, it's comfortable for sure. It is. It doesn't mute everything outside the car, and I think that's the hallmark of an Audi, where you get ride quality, but you also get tactility and feedback, because without feedback, you're just in a chamber of nothingness, and it's really hard to react to the road when you can't feel it at all. Any vibrations coming through are noticed, but not in any kind of aggressive way. I mean, sure, I feel the bumps, but I'm not offended. I'm not offended by them. In comfort mode, this throttle pedal really starts to get long, so you've got to give a nice bootful to get into it. But that's fine, because actually, when you're just cruising around town, you don't want to be making any crazy sudden movements. And with this amount of torque, it's pretty easy to be aggressive. And there we go. I'm going to add some regen to this, so that way I'm not just coasting and holding speed, I'm actually recovering a little bit of power, of juice when I get off that throttle, so I can slow down and not have to apply the brakes. So yes, maybe it doesn't have that one pedal feel like a Tesla, but it does have a natural feel like a normal car with engine braking. The display can be changed, so we can pop those up nice and big. Off we go. That's fun. It's an electric car, you have to do a launch control. So let's see, foot on brake, foot on gas, let go. All right, so that's how we get that overboost over that 100%. So I think we felt it now. Now we can say we felt the full beans. I would like to feel that more often. You do also feel that rear transmission, that 2-speed transmission in the back on that rear motor. You do feel it. It is there. It does exist. It's very smooth, but there's a bit of a thunk into that gear. All right, so a couple things that I don't like about it. I think the steering may be just a little too light. It doesn't provide crazy amounts of feedback, although it's not numb. It's somewhere in between, where I know that I'm connected to the car, but I don't really feel a ton of feedback from the front wheels into my hands. I don't mind that it's incredibly light at low speeds, though, because I feel like that makes the car really easy to drive in a parking lot or at low speeds. That does not bother me whatsoever. I do find it's very easy to drive on the highway, and they didn't go that outrageous Audi sharp steering route where when I'm on the highway, a tiny input sends me across 3 lanes. That drives me nuts. So this is a nice ratio. I'm happy. I don't know if it's different on the RS. Maybe this is just the base version, and maybe this is the one I prefer. I do think calling it the e-tron GT was maybe not the smartest move, just because the e-tron already exists, and we think of it as kind of a Q5 crossover EV rather than a sporty sedan. So I do wish they gave this its own name, something a little more independent from that crossover, but that's fine. You know, Tesla has become such a powerhouse that you have to discuss them when you're comparing any EV to any EV. You have to. And while, yes, the Tesla is probably going to have slightly better range, and don't get too mad at me for this, but they tend to overinflate what their real life ranges are, and Audi, Porsche tend to underinflate what their real life ranges are. So although this may say 235 or 240 miles, you may see a little bit more than that. Same way on a Tesla, you may see a little bit less than what they're claiming in your day-to-day driving. But I really see these big OEM EV cars as the driver's approach to EVs. I mean, we've got the build quality, we've got familiar interiors. We're not just creating a gadget, we're creating a car with an alternative fuel system. And the Tesla feels like a complete reinvention. It feels like you have to become one of them. It's like you've got to be indoctrinated into the cult. Whereas if you jumped into a Taycan or one of these e-tron GTs, I mean, you could just trade your S6 for this, and it really wouldn't change your life other than the fact that you're getting your power from the wall instead of from the pump. I do think that the big OEMs still have a long and arduous hill to climb when it comes to range, because to be taken seriously in this game, you know, you've got to be up over that 300-mile mark, and they're not there yet, but I don't think it discounts the cars from being excellent and usable, because I certainly don't drive 240 miles in a day. Tesla's really done an incredible job with their infrastructure. They've got superchargers all over the country. They've made it very easy to drive an electric car, and that is happening now for everybody else. The Electrify America network is getting stronger, it's getting faster. This is an 800-volt system, and I think it can charge from essentially a flat battery to 80% in under 30 minutes. I mean, that's not a small feat. That's fantastic, and that will allow you to drive across the country. In fact, the Cannonball EV record is now held by a Porsche Taycan. So you can't say you can't get from A to B, even if A is New York and B is Los Angeles. As we're pulling back into Audi Shrewsbury with the e-tron, I think it's worth noting that although Tesla can often beat out the big OEMs with range and with just outright straight line performance, I think it's got to be noted that the e-tron GT and the Taycan have superior handling dynamics, and that may just come down to experience. And I'm not saying the Tesla is a bad handler, but there's something to be said for this suspension setup and this chassis. It's really incredible. So while I pull this back in, I'm not here to say that I'm choosing sides, that I'm denouncing Tesla, that I'm saying this is the best EV ever built or anything along those lines. But I think it's got to be noted that competition is good. It's very good, and I'm really excited that this car exists. So thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive. I'll see you in the next one. And of course, thank you to Audi here in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, part of the McGovern Auto Group, for the opportunity to get a first look at the e-tron GT.